Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsey, and as always, I have the fantastic pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm really good, Brian. I can't believe we've just got 2 weekends left until the Derby, and we have got so much to talk about this show.
Absolutely. It's going to be a good show, Matt. We're only 11 days out, and we're going to talk Derby and some more Derby, but we're also going to preview the Kentucky Oaks on this big edition of HorseCenter. So fasten your seatbelt, folks. Let's jump right in. Matt, the first thing I want to do, we want to unveil the morning line here from HorseCenter and talk about these odds as far as whether we think those are good odds, not so good odds, fair odds, and so on. Let's start with the likely favorite, Justify. Matt, we're listing Justify at 3-1 as a relatively clear favorite, despite the relative quality of this field.
Yeah, I think that's true, Brian. As we've said before, it is just a really fantastic field, but I think there's no question that Justify will be the big favorite. Unbeaten, Bob Baffert, all those factors.
Exactly, Bob Baffert. Now, if he had won the Triple Crown, maybe those odds would be a little higher, but the Baffert factor's been an effect in years. He's been a mainstay at the Derby, the Triple Crown. He's been America's most successful trainer in Triple Crown races for just over 20 years now. So Justify, he's captured the imagination of everyone right from the get-go. His three races have been eye-catching, to say the least. However, Matt, on my fair odds line, I don't think 3-1 is too attractive to me, considering all the unanswered questions still, the pace, the distance, the competition, the 20 horses, everything that goes along with Derby. That's a little bit too low for my taste. However, 3-1's not bad if you think he's unbeatable.
Absolutely true. I agree with what you're saying. And when you're talking about 20 horse field and you're using Derby horses, whether it's in daily doubles or pick fours or pick fives, you get more value than those odds.
That's true. So there's value in every horse in this field. I'm going to try to beat Justify as the favorite, but if you like him, go for him, because he's not going to be 6-5 or anything like that. Magnum Moon, Matt. Magnum Moon, this was a little tougher, but Magnum Moon is a slight second choice. We got him at 5-1, just ahead of Mendelssohn at 6-1. Those are the two we think are vying for second choice.
Yeah, I think that those are the second and third choices of a lot of people. I think some people might be saying Mendelssohn as the second choice, but I don't know. I think I agree with you, Brian. We talked about the Bob Baffert factor. We're talking about the Todd Pletcher factor here with Magnum Moon, and he was so impressive in his last race. And there are questions about horses coming over from England to run in the Derby. So I feel comfortable with Magnum Moon ending up as the second choice. Not by much, though, over Mendelssohn.
Yeah, I think Mendelssohn's race was the most impressive, the UAE Derby, but he's got more questions, just like Justify. Different questions, but just like Justify. International horses have not fared great in the Kentucky Derby, probably since Bold Arrangement ran a big race decades ago. So Mendelssohn has his work cut out for him, but if he can repeat that UAE Derby 6-1 or so, doesn't look bad. Magnum Moon, Matt, beware the undefeated horse. I think just like Justify, Magnum Moon, 5-1, he's going to get some play. I'm not sure if I like him at 5-1, but I certainly see him as a danger. So 5-1, if you love him, not bad. If you think this field is just a lot tougher, speed figure-wise, Magnum Moon is not as good as Justify or a few others. So maybe you want to beat Magnum Moon as the second choice. The next bunch of horses we have on these, our projected odds, Matt, are all at 8-1. I have a feeling Audible might be preferred of the trio, but we have Audible, Good Magic, 2-year-old champion, Bolt Doro, who ran against Justify last time, all at 8-1.
Yeah, the waters on the morning line get a lot murkier at this point, and I think Audible in there at fourth choice makes sense again with the Pletcher factor, but Good Magic ran well in the Bluegrass, and that's Chad Brown, and he's as big a name almost now as Baffert and Pletcher are. So I think those two may be a little bit ahead of Bolt Doro just because Bolt Doro hasn't had the win and he doesn't have the name trainer like those other horses do.
On the other hand, Bolt Doro's been the horse that we've known since last fall. Bolt Doro has not run a bad race. He's run really well in every race. And, I think there are people out there, and it wouldn't surprise me if this turned out to be the case where they think the two California horses are the two best horses, and that would be Justify and Bolt Doro. I'm not ready to jump to that conclusion with all these good horses, but I think Bolt Doro is obviously a classy horse, and third time off the layoff, chasing really unpressured Justify. I think he makes a lot of sense, and if he's in the 8-1 range, just like Good Magic, the Bluegrass winner, who seems to be coming up to the race really well for Chad Brown here in Kentucky, and then Audible. If you look at those speed figures, behind Justify, Audible's right there. Those two races in Florida were good. So any one of those three, 8-1 makes a lot of sense, both for fair odds for me and also what they'll actually be in the Derby. So interesting field at the top here, Matt. Then we drop down a little bit. No horse has won the Wood Memorial and then won the Kentucky Derby for a long time, Matt. I think this year it could happen, but I think that factor alone makes Vino Rosso a little bit higher than the six above him, and the fact that his Tampa Bay Derby was not very good. So Vino Rosso next at 15-1, and on my fair odds line, I have him a lot lower. So I'm going to be using Vino Rosso at about 15-1 for sure, man.
This is the magic of the Kentucky Derby for all of us handicappers and all of us bettors, is that it's a 20-horse field, Brian, and it really only happens once in our country, and they all can't be 5-1, 6-1, 3-1. You've got to have horses that have big odds, that have odds that are higher than what you think is the potential of the horse. And I think Vino Rosso is the perfect example of that from the Todd Pletcher barn. And if anybody has got this point system going to the Derby thing figured out better than Pletcher, you're going to have a pretty strong case to convince me of that. I like the Wood Memorial also, and imagine Vino Rosso at 15-1, maybe or maybe a little bit more than that. Those are attractive odds that are going to make you want to maybe make some win bets in that case, but it also means that he's going to be a really good price in the pick threes, the daily doubles, the pick fours, the trifectas. This is the thing that's so special about betting on the Derby.
Vino Rosso, Matt, I think he's a 1.25 mile horse, and I think he's one of the horses truly developing right now, getting better right now. Pletcher, Velasquez, this is the one he's liked all along. Velasquez won this last year, of course, with Pletcher and Always Dreaming. Vino Rosso, I think they have a reasonable shot to do it again. I love the odds on him. We're going to go a little faster now, Matt, because anybody else on the list is a long shot, including my boy Jack, who's really run well in graded stakes all over the Midwest this year. I have him next at 20-1. Noble Indy, 25-1 are the next two on the line.
Yeah, I agree, Brian, that the horses that we just spent the most time on, I feel very certain that the winner of the race is from that group. And yes, folks, I know that there have been big odds winners in the Kentucky Derby plenty of times, but when that happens, it's not coming out of a field of such quality in here. So when we're talking about the rest of these horses, to me, these are horses that I would really think about if you guys are wanting to play trifectas or superfectas. These are the kind of horses that maybe they could sneak in for third or fourth and produce some big prices. That's happened many times in the Derby.
Okay, individually, Matt, my boy Jack, I think, is one of those horses that I think we can use underneath. A very consistent rallier. I think he's up against it as far as quality in this field, but certainly a horse who could rally up for third or fourth. Noble Indy's a horse I won't be using 25-1. I don't like him that much, and I think he'll be closer to the pace early and have a hard time down the lane. There's some other interesting horses still coming. Solomini, Flame Away, and Hofburg, all at 30-1, Matt. Also Enticed. To me, the two interesting ones there are Hofburg and Solomini, just kind of different reasons, but an unknown factor. Maybe they step forward for 1.25 miles in the Derby, and maybe at 30-1, Hofburg and Solomini run a big race.
They certainly could. I like Hofburg, even though he's inexperienced with his only three starts, but he ran a really nice race in the Florida Derby, and he could develop under the leadership of Bill Mott and get a piece of it. Solomini, so much potential. Who knows when he's going to wake up? But at 30-1, it's worth a shot.
Right. I think Solomini could be a 1.25 mile horse, the son of Curlin, and as we know, he has been famously not changing leads of race. If all of a sudden he learns his lessons and does it in the Derby, interesting horse at 30-1. Let's look at the 40-1 shots on our line next, Matt. There's a bunch of them. We have Combatant, Lone Sailor, who had a big workout here recently. Free Drop Billy, Instilled Regard is now in the field. I have all four of them at 40-1 here on the HorseCenter morning line.
And all four of them are horses who have done good things in the past. And if they could get back to that big race again, they could get in the bottom places in those exotic wagers.
Right, and we've seen that a lot over the years, as you mentioned. And the interesting thing about all four of these horses, Combatant, Lone Sailor, Free Drop Billy, and Instilled Regard, they're all eligible to be passing horses late. So again, as Matt's been talking about, if you're looking at exotics and you want to get a long shot in there, take a look at this quartet at 40-1. Combatant, Free Drop Billy, Instilled Regard, and Lone Sailor. All right, Matt, now we get to the real long shots. Lucas was trying to get a couple. Dwayne Lucas, multiple Triple Crown Kentucky Derby winner. He only got one in Bravazzo, and we have him at 50-1 in here.
Yep, and like we've got Bravazzo at 50-1, Promises Fulfilled at 75-1. I don't see them being impactful at the end of the race, although at the beginning of the race, they could have some influence on the pace.
Yeah, so that doesn't really affect the betting. We don't think they'll stick around, and hopefully that they ensure an honest pace. We want a fair race for the Kentucky Derby. Also on that list, Matt, is Firenze Fire at 75-1. We should mention that Combatant and Instilled Regard are two new horses into the top 20. Gronkowski had a slight illness overseas, won't be coming. And Quip, they decided they wanted a little bit more time. Maybe they wanted an easier race for the lightly raced Colt, who won the Tampa Bay Derby and was second in the Arkansas Derby. So he'll be waiting for the Preakness. So this is the 20 horses as it stands with our odds. We'll show them again here, Matt. I'm looking forward to Vino Rosso at the odds as the best play at the odds.
I think that's a good recommendation, Brian. I agree.
Matt, we talked about the odds, a little bit about our fair odds for the Kentucky Derby, but now we got to break down the race as far as how they're going to run it. Now, with 20 horses, there are horses that will be farther back or even a little closer than we think, depending on racing luck. Kentucky Derby, for good or for bad, certainly racing luck plays a big part in the Derby. But we've identified 4 categories of horses. I think, Matt, on my end, I expect a pace that's not crazy fast, but on the other hand, is fast enough to make it a very fair race, especially at 1.25 miles. Would you agree with that assessment, sir?
I would, Brian. I think maybe we're going to get a little bit of a faster pace than we've had the last couple years.
Agreed. So let's start with the front runners, Matt. We've identified the 5 horses that we think are most likely to be up there on the lead. Now, we should say that there are certain horses who could be closer than we project here and could be farther. There's certainly horses that we're not quite sure on, but this is our best guess as what might unfold early in the Kentucky Derby. And I'm going to start, Matt, the front runners list with the horse I think most likely to be on the lead, and that's Promises Fulfilled.
Yeah, Promises Fulfilled, certainly. That's what he's got to do to go to the lead. And as Brian was saying, I think the post position draw will be a factor in where horses end up. I'm not usually a big guy with post position, but in the Derby, you have to pay attention to it. Front runners are so important in determining the way the race plays out. Since the year 2000, only one front runner, only one horse has won the Derby gate to wire every step of the way, and that was War Emblem.
Absolutely. It's tough to do. And if we're right, Promises Fulfilled is on the lead, we don't see another War Emblem scenario here. Now, there are going to be a lot of horses chasing this horse from the Dale Romans barn early. Among them, we see the most likely to be Bravazzo, another long shot. Flame Away, the consistent horse from Marcassi barn. And then we have two of our big favorites, Matt, Justify from Bob Baffert and Mendelssohn, partly because of what he did in the UAE Derby, we think will be at least pressing this pace.
That, from what they've done in the past, it certainly seems that that's the way they're going to run. The Derby is such a special thing, especially with these inexperienced horses. A horse like Justify has never been in a big field like this, and the energy and that the horses get from running in the pack and the pace can turn a relaxed horse into a horse that gets into the bit and wants to compete. So that's one of the kind of big questions that Brian and I have about Justify. The Kentucky Derby is not a relaxed scenario for horses, so it's going to be interesting to see how Justify and how Mendelssohn deal with that situation.
Right, and being on or near the lead in the Kentucky Derby is not necessarily a bad thing by any means, because if you're there, it means that there has to be really good rallies coming from behind. But what Matt and I are both saying is there should be some speed in here. Promises Fulfilled, and then each other, Justify, Mendelssohn, not to mention Flame Away, Bravazzo, and maybe a few others. We didn't even mention 170,000 screaming fans, Matt. So there's added pressure, there's added adrenaline, all of the above. Should be a test for the big horses like Justify and Mendelssohn. And as we look at stalkers, we put Magnum Moon on the stalker list, Matt, just because I think he might have shown the ability to sit off the lead a little bit more. But he's another one of the favorites that could be very close to this early pace. So as we go into the stalker list, our second category, Magnum Moon tops it.
Yeah, Brian, Magnum Moon is an interesting horse because in the Arkansas Derby, Magnum Moon went out onto the lead, but that was a whole different situation where there was a soft pace. So I also expect Magnum Moon to be running a little bit behind the pace setters in here. And this stalker group is really important to talk about, Brian, because the last four Kentucky Derby winners have all been horses that have come off the pace a little bit. And since the year 2000, 8 of the Derby winners have been stalkers.
Yeah, and we have a pretty compact group here. While we think any of them are eligible to be a little closer than I guess it would be sixth early, they also could be a little farther back. Magnum Moon, you're right, Matt, has shown the ability to run a few different running styles. So we expect him to be a little bit off the lead. Noble Indy is another horse who likes to be close to the lead, not on the lead. So we put him in the stalker list. Hasn't run since the Louisiana Derby, but certainly a talented horse. And then there's a couple others that were stalkers mid-pack. I think they might be a little closer here. Solimini, the enigmatic Solimini, and then Enticed, who's been a consistent horse, has a stakes win at Churchill Downs for trainer Kieran McLaughlin.
Yeah, and that is an interesting group, and the way they run, I guess, is going to be determined by what happens out of the starting gate. So all this position stuff is such an important part of the way the Derby plays out.
And then we have a very interesting next group, Matt. It's a big group. We call it the mid-pack group. And in the Derby, that means you could be as far back as 14th or something here. But these are horses who like to make a little bit of rally, but they're not deep closers by any means. One horse on the list I should mention, we went back and forth a little bit whether he was mid-pack or a real closer, and that's Hofberg. And he's so inexperienced it might be too early to tell. But we have him in the mid-pack group, along with some of the big names again, Bolt Doro, Good Magic, and Audible, horses we like for the Kentucky Derby, Matt. They want to be 10th and 12th early. Sounds like that's far back, but in the Derby, that's just middle of the pack, and they want to make their move on the turn. A lot of Kentucky Derbies have been won this way.
They certainly have, and these are the kind of horses the jockeys at the beginning of the race are really simply going to be looking to get their horses out of the gate, find a nice, comfortable position, get their horses to relax. And that is such an important thing in the race because they're going 10 furlongs. None of them have ever gone 10 furlongs. It's a big question for all of them. So the riders that can get their horses to relax and start conserving a little energy while all these other horses that we mentioned are running hard on the bit and are competing and using up energy. Mid-pack is a good place to be in the Kentucky Derby.
Mid-pack is a good place to be. A strong pace is a good thing for them. And racing luck in this big field, of course, plays a huge part. Other horses we have listed as the mid-pack bunch, Matt, include Combatant, also Free Drop Billy, Instilled Regard, some of those 40-1 shots that could get into the Super possibly, as we talked about before. And then Firenze Fire, a horse who wants to make a little rally, but we worry about at 10 furlongs. So that list was deep, Matt. I'm going to go over them real quick again. Hofberg, we could have put him in the late runner group, but we have him in the mid-pack. Then Combatant, Audible, Good Magic, Free Drop Billy, Instilled Regard, Firenze Fire, and Bolt Dora, all horses hoping to make that middle move and be right there as the field turns for home in the Kentucky Derby. And last but not least, Matt, we have the late runners. And it's tough to come from way back in the Kentucky Derby. But if you get a good pace and a good trip, sometimes the Derby at 10 furlongs, just the sheer distance of this race, sets up for horses who can come from well back. We certainly don't think these will be 18, 19, and 20 early, but these are the horses we've identified as the most likely to be in the back third of the pack. And they include the horse I'm most interested in betting, Matt, and that's Vino Rosso.
Yeah, and it's not that this hasn't happened before. We go back to 2013, and Orb was one of those horses who was in the back of the pack at the race, and it turned out to be a contentious pace. It was an interesting race where the pace setters all faded and ended up finishing towards the rear of the pack, and the horses that were at the back of the pack relaxing were the ones that had the run at the end of the 10 furlongs and hit the wire in front, Orb being one of them. Again, that overall field was not of the quality of this field. I don't really expect all of the horses that are at the front of this Kentucky Derby to fade to the back. I think and I'm sure Brian feels this way too, some of these horses are going to be competing at the end.
Absolutely, and we're talking about the winning position here a lot because everybody wants to win the Kentucky Derby, the connections and handicappers alike. But I think these horses offer real value underneath as well. So none of them will be among the single-digit runners, but all three of them, we have Vino Rosso, My Boy Jack, and Lone Sailor, offer good value if you think they can get all the way up there to win the race. But also, these are horses that often hit the board. Derby winners don't often come from way back, but often you have horses hitting the board. Looking at Lee last year, for example, who have come from quite a way back. So think about that when you're filling out the bottom spots in your exotics. My Boy Jack, the consistent rallier, and Lone Sailor, who ran a big race in the Louisiana Derby and seems to like Churchill Downs. Those are the three we have in the late runner slot, Matt.
Yeah, and like you said, Brian, the trifectas and the superfectas historically at in the Kentucky Derby have paid really big numbers. That's even with the favorite being in one of the other spots, in first or second or third. You get one of those 30-1 shots in one of those spots, and there's big money.
Very true, Matt. Matt, you specifically asked me to talk Derby to you today on HorseCenter, but I want to talk a little bit about the fillies, the Kentucky Oaks. Gotta love the fillies too, and the Derby's huge, but the Kentucky Oaks is a very big, important race in its own right. Last year, Abel Tasman came from way back to win the Oaks. She was the 3-year-old filly champion. That's happened a lot over the years. I think it could happen again this year. And Matt, we're looking at a bit of a showdown here with the Kentucky Derby deep on the top end of the pool with a lot of good horses. The Kentucky Oaks, there's two fillies who have really announced themselves as the top 3-year-old fillies in the country. Of course, I'm talking about Monomoy Girl and Midnight Bisou. We were at the Ashland to see Monomoy Girl last time.
We sure were, Brian, and it was no contest in that race. Monomoy Girl put on a real show and took that field easily, leading the race most of the way around the track, which was very interesting because in her previous win at the fairgrounds in the Rachel Alexandra, she ran a completely different kind of race, rallying from the back of the field. It was a small field, but rallying from the back of the field in there, which shows the talent of that horse, that she can win from the front end or she can win rallying.
Absolutely. Monomoy Girl has been good from the beginning, Matt, whether it was Indiana Downs or right here at Churchill Downs last fall. Her only loss was a tough one indeed. She's absolutely done nothing wrong for trainer Brad Cox, one of the top young trainers in the country, daughter of Tapizar, which makes me worried just a little bit about 9 furlongs if she's pressured too much early, but certainly a big talent, the chestnut filly. Ashland, she got a hold of an easy pace, and to her credit, she just blitzed them. She did what she was supposed to do with the pace advantage. And in the race, Rachel Alexandra, of course, she didn't get out of the gate very well, so that's why she came from way back. So obviously showing her quality, a filly of high quality. She deserves to be favored in the Kentucky Oaks, Matt, but all year long, my top Oaks filly has been another one. She's the one coming from the West Coast, a daughter of Midnight Lute for trainer Bill Spar. I'm talking about, of course, the Santa Anita Oaks winner, Midnight Bisou.
And Brian, you have been touting Midnight Bisou since the beginning of the year, and she has done nothing but make you look good in there. She's 3 for 3 this year, has run really nicely. She's a late rallier, which I think is a good thing in this Kentucky Oaks field. The Oaks is a really interesting race, and folks, I'm looking forward to the 2-day daily double with the Kentucky Oaks and the Kentucky Derby, which is a great wager to think about because, again, you get to hook these Oaks horses up with horses from that 20-horse field of the Derby, and that gets you good value.
Yeah, man, I'll be throwing in a little bit on one of my favorite bets of the year with the big turf race as well on Saturday and that Oaks Derby and Turf Pick 3. Getting back to Midnight Bisou, Matt, she's been able to stay close to the pace and make her explosive move. But in the Santa Anita Oaks, she was able to show what she can do with a little bit more pace up front. She came from way back, and the move was pretty darn electrifying. I've said before, I'll say it again, she really does remind me of Blind Luck a lot in her running style. I like Midnight Bisou to upset. It's going to be a mild upset because she's a heavy, heavy second choice in here. But I like her just a bit to upset the apple cart, beat Monomoy Girl. But we are talking about two very good 3-year-old fillies in the Kentucky Oaks.
Yep, we certainly are. And it's going to be a field of 14 going 9 furlongs.
Going 9 furlongs. There isn't as much pace as we thought there might be. The fantasy pace setter, the filly from Minnesota, will not be in here So Monomoy Girl might not have the fastest of paces to worry about, but with fillies like Take Charge Paula, Classy Act, there should be a strong pace, or at least a reasonable pace in the Oaks for it to be a fair race. Speaking of fair races, I think Eskimo Kisses, we looked at the Ashland a little bit. She really didn't have a fair race because that was easy for Monomoy Girl on the lead from the rail with a slow pace. But she made up a lot of ground for trainer Kenny McPeak. And I think Eskimo Kisses, if she gets a better setup in the Oaks, is an interesting horse to run a big race as well.
Yeah, she did make up a lot of ground. And like you said, Brian, there wasn't much pace. And hey, she wasn't going to catch Monomoy Girl under those kind of circumstances. But she made a really nice run for Kenny McPeak. And he's the kind of trainer that can get a horse ready for a big performance in a big race.
Matt, I think the third choice in the Oaks is an interesting one. She's been working in California for her new trainer, Bob Baffert. She's never run anywhere but Maidan. She won the UAE Oaks, was her biggest win, and then she ran second, albeit it was a long way second to Mendelssohn. But Raya is an interesting filly coming out of that mile 3/16 race against the boys where she was able to beat everyone else. She was second. Now with Bob Baffert, he's had a little bit of time with her to get her ready. She's got to be a little bit of an X factor in this Kentucky Oaks.
She certainly does, and she came back after winning the Oaks at Dubai and came back on a little bit of short rest, and hey, beat an entire field of boys except for Mendelssohn. And the plan all along was for this horse after the UAE Derby to come to the United States and go into the barn of Bob Baffert. So there was a plan with this horse all along, and hey, nobody's better at getting horses ready for big races than Mr. Baffert.
I'm going to try to see if she can beat me as the third choice in here, though, Matt. I like a few other long shots better. Eskimo Kisses, as for one. Coach Rocks is really coming to hand lately for trainer Dale Romans. Finally, after a few attempts, she finally broke her maiden in big style down in South Florida, and then she came right back to win the Gulfstream Park Oaks. Coach Rocks certainly deserves consideration in here, as do the fantasy one too, Matt. I don't know if you saw the fantasy live, but it was a heck of a race. These two fillies, Wonder Godot and Sassy Sienna, put away that speed filly late, and they ding-donged it down the stretch in the fantasy. I thought Sassy Sienna, who's also from the Brad Cox barn of Monomoy Girl, got the best of Wonder Godot after it looked like Wonder Godot might have the jump on her.
Yeah, certainly did. Sassy Sienna got the win. Wonder Godot has been right there in 4 tries on the road to the Kentucky Oaks, but she's come up a little short with a couple seconds and a couple thirds. So out of that duo, I think I like Sassy Sienna a little bit better.
Yeah, and Wonder Godot, of course, was the Canadian two-year filly champion and the Demoiselle winner last fall, so we know she likes 9 furlongs. Other horses we haven't even mentioned yet. Blamed is the Toast of New Mexico. Unfortunately, she's never run away. The Kentucky bred has never run away from New Mexico racing, so we really don't know too much about her class level. She's going to get a big test here, but she's looked good in New Mexico. My Miss Lily looked like a filly who might pop up, and she certainly did, winning the Gazelle last time in a hard-fought victory for Mark Hennig. So another couple who should be interesting options in the Oaks.
Yep, the filly from New Mexico has she lost her first race in her maiden start, but then has strung together 5 wins in a row. And My Miss Lily looked really good at Aqueduct, but that wasn't the strongest field in that race.
The consistent Take Charge Paula should add speed, as should Classy Act, who disappointed just a little bit in the Fairgrounds Oaks. They should make a little bit interesting pace scenario there for Monomoy Girl early. Chocolate Martini's come from nowhere to win 2 in a row. I don't know if she can upset another one in here. Red Ruby disappointed last time at Oakland, but I think she's got some talent. And finally, Patrona Margarita is looking for another big upset. She got one last fall at Churchill Downs.
Yeah, so it's an interesting field, but I don't know, Brian. It seems to me like it's pretty likely that the winner is going to come from the top two that we mentioned, Monomoy Girl and Midnight Bisou.
Well, if Eskimo Kisses can somehow turn the table on Monomoy Girl, I wouldn't mind a Midnight Bisou over Eskimo Kisses exacta. But for my money, yeah, it looks more likely that the top two, Midnight Bisou on top for me, Monomoy Girl second in the Kentucky Oaks. Hey, Matt, we have to thank our sponsor, the best contest site out there, Derby Wars. We also need to thank you folks for watching. We see you're tuning in masse lately for HorseCenter, and we sure do appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel right here at Horse Racing Nation. Can I get a parting shot from you, sir?
Yeah, I just want to add on there, thank you for everybody that's watching, and thank you for so many comments that are showing up after the video. I jump in there and chat with you guys, so it's great seeing you there. And as always, I want to thank our producer, Brett Workman, for putting together the show.
Brett's a good man, isn't he? Matt, let's also mention our new venture, the Horse Racing Nation guys, the HorseCenter guys, Matt and Brian. We have a new gig out there. It's called Derby Day Racing. We are looking for more investors still for our 2-year-old partnership that we are opening right now. We're going to be buying 3 2-year-olds this spring, Matt. We're nothing but excited to do that and to race in Derby Day Racing silks with a lot of our friends. Anybody that wants to be a part of our partnership, contact us as well. And Matt, why don't we, last week we trailed off with Winks. People seem to like the way we ended the show, so we're going to do it again. There was a really terrific stretch battle at Charlestown, $1.2 million Charlestown Classic, something awesome, and war story all the way to the wire. We'll see you next week, folks.
That half went in 48-2. Diversify continues to cruise along up top of Fleet Willie, still just sitting in that second spot, sitting chilly as they head onto the backstretch. War Story is still racing comfortably in third. Then Something Awesome outside of Fear the Cowboy, Discreet Lover, and You're to Blame at the back. Diversify begins to feel the heat from a Fleet Willie as the field heads past the 3/8 pole. A Fleet Willie puts his head in front, and a Fleet Willie takes the lead from Diversify, who's not done yet, but has to find more. Here's Something Awesome outside of War Story, 3/4 in 13 flat. It's a Fleet Willie, and to the far outside, Something Awesome. War Story battles on in between. Fear the Cowboy, Diversify is gone, then You're to Blame and Discreet Lover as they come to the top of the stretch. A 3-way battle for the Classic. To the inside, it's a Fleet Willie. War Story in between Something Awesome and Fear the Cowboy down the outside. Coming to the 16th pole, War Story has his nose in front. Something Awesome, Fear the Cowboy. War Story, Something Awesome, Something Awesome.